Morning.
Let me call to order this budget development work session of the Mayor and Commission. And we'll dive right into the agenda. Ms. Johnson, if you want to tee it off, please.
Yes. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, members of the public who may be watching. For the record, West Palm Beach Administrator Faye Johnson. The purpose of the budget development work sessions, is to provide the board with budget-related information in response to discussion that the board had as part of the adoption of the FY 25-26 budget. And while that discussion focused primarily on the board's desire to reduce the millage, this focus of today's presentation really relates to the state legislative property tax reform because the two are interrelated, and we want the board to have really an understanding of the different proposals that the state is considering, and then how that will impact your decision when you get further along in the budget process and have to decide on what level of a millage reduction you want for the FY27 budget. Now, the proposals before the state goes through their process, but with whatever comes out of the state process, it will impact our FY28 budget. So from a planning standpoint, we are prepared that our general fund budget will be reshaped by two different actions. The FY27 budget will be reshaped by the board's decision on a millage reduction, and then the FY28 general fund budget will be reshaped based on what actually hits a referendum and ultimately if it were to get approved. So what we have prepared for the board, if you all would take note, we have binders on the tables with all of the PowerPoints from today, and then we have dividers for each of the anticipated budget development work sessions, given that there's going to be quite a bit of information. If the board utilize those binders, you can have all of that information contained in one place for your ease of reference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Bridget Souffrant, and our City Attorney, Kimberly Rothenberg, and they're going to lead the work session discussions this morning. Ms. Souffrant?
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Bridget Souffrant, Chief Financial Officer. In today's presentation, City Attorney Rothenberg is going to cover various proposed property tax reductions that are being considered at the state level. On each of those proposals, she is going to show an estimated financial impact relative to that proposal. Back in November, Palm Beach County Property Appraiser's Office sent out an email communicating to all of their jurisdictions, giving us access to a database dashboard. That information had our current year property data and assessed value data. The county reviewed the various proposals and dissected our data in a way to allow us to estimate the financial impact of each proposal. Assistant CFO Avril Smith has been monitoring this data and working with it relative to our budget from the day that we received the notice. I am incredibly appreciative that the county created this dashboard for us to consider what the impact could be, especially as you will hear throughout the presentation, the complexity and nuances of some of these bills that have been proposed. To that end, we see that the county has attempted to adjust and edit the data since they've posted it on their website. So as you go through the presentation and you see the financial impact, please keep in mind that these are estimates and that as we get closer to anything coming into fruition, we will have to firm up that data and update it as we're working off of the current fiscal year. There will be a few slides where you'll also see a comment that the county has since removed the data. We believe that the county provided the data and then in their deeper review of that bill, realized that they would essentially have to go property by property in order to give us a true impact of what would occur, or they may not even have access to the data that's needed to make the financial estimate. So in those slides specifically, please consider what's listed as your financial impact as the worst case scenario. I will be here if you have questions along the way, and with that, I will turn it over to City Attorney Rothenberg.
Good morning, Kimberly Rothenberg, City Attorney, and I will present to you some of the joint resolutions that are going through the process currently. But before I do that, we're going to look at three major areas. Where is the taxing authority? What are the proposed joint resolutions, and what's the timeline for adoption of during the legislative session, and ballot measures if they get to that level. So first, the taxing authority is found in Article 7 of the Florida Constitution. It lays out all of the various exemptions and other issues and items related to the exemptions that are permissible under the Constitution. Article 8 is a provision that's specific to local government and the operations of local government. That's where you find the home rule power that's later put into the Chapter 166 of the statutes. So the first resolution we'll look at is Joint Resolution 201. This resolution, in essence, would provide an exemption for all of the non-school related ad valorem assessments for homesteaded properties. If adopted, it would go into effect January 1st, 2027. It has 3 committee stops. Generally speaking, all of these bills will have 3 committee stops. Once it passes those committees, it then goes to the full House, the full Senate for consideration. If it passes all of those stops, then it goes to the next step. The estimated revenue loss that was provided, that was spoke about by Bridget, is $51.4 million. The next resolution is Joint Resolution 203. This resolution has passed all 3 committee stops that it was scheduled for, the last of which was this last Friday. It increases the homestead exemption by $100,000 for each property for 10 years, which would commence in 2027. The entire assessed value of the property would come into fruition in 2037. If adopted, the first year revenue impact to the city is estimated at $12.5 million.
Ms. Rothenberg, am I correct in interpreting both of those bills as also restricting our ability to decrease the budgets of the public safety?
Let me go back, and I apologize for missing that one. The first one...
That's not insignificant.
The first one establishes a prohibition for law enforcement budgets. Many of these you'll see expands through an amendment through the process, and this one can still be amended as well to include not only law enforcement, but also firefighters and other first responders is what it says, but other first responders is not identified. It says it will be adopted and fleshed out in general law, so there would be another bill that would identify who other first responders is. The next House resolution is Resolution 205. It's passed 2 of the committee stops. It's now in the Ways and Means Committee, but that has not yet been scheduled. If adopted, this resolution would exempt persons over the age of 65 from non-school related ad valorem taxes. It prohibits municipalities from reducing, again, the law enforcement funding, and they look at either whichever is greater, the fiscal year 25-26 budget or the 26-27 budget. So that number will be identified based on your budget for those fiscal years. The estimated lost revenue for year one is $29.3 million. And there is based on approximately 10,000 homesteaded properties that would be within this category of age 65 and older.
Mayor, if I could, where the bills at this point do not identify fighters or fire services, from a planning standpoint, we are treating fire in the same vein as law enforcement in terms of a carve out, because this board has treated both public safety operations similar. So that's from a planning standpoint, we're looking at a carve out for fire as well.
Okay. The next resolution is resolution number 207. It's passed its first committee stop and is currently slated to be heard by the House State Affairs Committee, but again, it has not yet been scheduled. This resolution provides for a 25% reduction in the assessed value of homestead properties available after the first two $25,000 exemptions, and I can explain that quickly for you. Currently, the first $25,000 in property value is totally exempt from ad valorem taxation. There is a second exemption that's available to individuals. It's an additional $25,000 for a total of $50,000 tax exemption. This particular bill would allow for 25% reduction available after the $25,000 exemptions are applied. It's applicable to all non-school ad valorem taxes. The resolution also provides, again, for the reduction in law enforcement funding, and it would be effective January 1, 2027, if approved by the voters. Its estimated revenue loss in year one would be $20.5 million.
You mentioned if approved by the voters. All of these will be subject to some kind of referendum?
So, yes, what happens is if it passes the three committee stops, and or the House and the Senate decide it doesn't have to finish going through the committee stops and they take it up by their full membership, it has to be adopted by 3/5 of the membership of each House and the Senate. Once it does that, then it goes to the next step to have the ballot language created. That ballot language then goes to the voters, and I have a little slide on kind of that process as well. So 209 is another joint resolution by the House. It creates an alternative second homestead that we just talked about. The second $25,000 would be replaced by a $200,000 homestead exemption for homestead properties which are insured by comprehensive homeowners policy insurance. This alternative $200,000 exemption would replace that second exemption and is applicable to properties with a value between $25,000 and $250,000 instead of the $25,550 that's currently in the Constitution. The estimated revenue loss for this proposal is $25 million. Again, the language for what was originally just firefighters was amended to include the law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders. And I apologize, it's originally was only directed at law enforcement. It adds firefighters and other first responders. The final House resolution that we're going to review today is Resolution 213. It's passed 2 committees of reference and is currently before the Ways and Means Committee. It's awaiting scheduling, has not yet been scheduled. This resolution changes the limits in assessments that are currently done every year to every 3 years. It limits increases to homestead properties to 3%, or the change in inflation over a 3-year period, whichever is less. It limits the increases in assessments for non-homestead property also to 15% every 3 years instead of the 10% currently codified. It is applicable to all non-school ad valorem taxes. It prohibits reducing the funding for services provided by law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders below a specified base year. That concludes my presentation as to the House joint resolutions. There are a few Senate resolutions as well. I can take questions if you have any related to those specific resolutions.
Questions? Commissioner Baduzzi?
Thank you very much for this presentation. I think that this is absolutely necessary for us to do, and getting ahead of it and doing it this early, I certainly appreciate that opportunity to discuss this. You've mentioned several initiatives, several things that our legislators are looking at. Do we have any idea politically where we stand? Which one of these is most likely to pass, if any of them pass? And maybe if we're not in a position to talk about the politics of it, then maybe we should, maybe seek someone to give us some guidance on that, just so that we know how to prepare and see what we're facing in revenue loss potentially.
Well, we've had some conversations with our lobby team, and as you saw, the three committees of reference, while these bills were first filed back quite some time ago, they haven't met for the most part. All of their committees, except for a couple of those have not yet been scheduled for full consideration before the House and the Senate. They may or may not be passed by both, but what is apparent, and it's on another slide, is that in addition to this regular session, there is an opportunity for a special session, and it is the governor's will to have a special session to come up with a full tax exemption, is what his idea is, but certainly the House and the Senate would have to agree to what that would look like, and I think that they will take into consideration their various iterations, so it's going to be something like that in a special session.
Thank you.
President Lambert?
Thank you. Thank you. I agree with your comments. This is extremely important for us to be considering now. Commissioner Peduzzi, and to my colleagues, I'll share with you, in Tallahassee, this was probably the #1 conversation that was being had during Palm Beach County Days. And I was pleased to hear the chambers of commerce that were up there as well. The business community was taking this extremely seriously, even though it seems like right now the municipalities will bear the brunt of this. The businesses were looking at how it will impact them if they have increased taxes, as well as discussion about the impact to renters, because the non-homestead homes, will bear the brunt as well. A lot of moving parts on this.
So I will move quickly through the next 3 Senate resolutions, and I say that because all of these bills were filed back in October 23rd. They were scheduled like their counterparts or listed for 3 committee references. None of these bills has been scheduled to be heard by any of the committees. So they haven't even gotten through their first step, despite being filed back in October. But Senate Joint Resolution 270 repeals prior legislation allowing municipalities to grant additional homestead exemptions to seniors, and we did adopt one here locally. But it creates a uniform homestead exemption that would be required as opposed to optional, which covers all non-school ad valorem taxes for owners who are over 65, who have lived in the property for at least 5 years and whose income does not exceed $350,000, subject to a cost of living adjustment annually. It also clarifies that those who are totally disabled and over 65 who don't qualify for this exemption would continue to be able to receive the existing discounts that are available to them. This provision does not have the same language that's included in the House bills relating to the first responders. Senate Resolution 274 stops increases of assessed values on homestead, the increases that you get annually after 20 years. It grants a 50% non-school ad valorem exemption for owners residing in their homes 30 years or more. And it allows the owners to aggregate those two 20-year and 30-year periods of time to reach that 20 or 30 years. So if they own multiple homes, they can add those together. Senate Resolution 278 applies for purchasers of new homes who are qualified for homestead exemption and are purchasing a new home that was previously assessed at less than $500,000 the preceding year. It caps the assessed value to the newly acquired property to 150% of that valuation. So, for example, if the property was valued at $455 or $499,000 the preceding year, you could only assess the taxes on $748,500 as opposed to whatever the purchase price is, which would be the current way that it operates. Senate Resolution 280 actually just amends Chapter 193, which codifies the constitutional provision that we just reviewed, and it reiterates the same ideas as Resolution 278. And finally, Joint Resolution 282 is applicable to commercial properties. It limits the annual increase of the assessed value to properties owned by small businesses to 3% or to the CPI, whichever is lower. And that concludes the Senate versions of various bills that have not yet been heard in any committees of reference.
Any questions or comments on that portion of the presentation? President Lambert.
I had a question on one of the House proposals. It was one where it would increase over the years, but it looked like the county number that was given to us was for the first year. I know that, these are just assumptive numbers, but are we assuming then that would increase after that first year?
I will let Bridget answer that, but I would make that assumption if I had to. So Bridget, we're looking at Joint Resolution 230, and the first year of the, I'm sorry, 203, if you're dyslexic, it's 230. But it's the one that raises, initially sets a $100,000 tax exemption and increases by $10,000 each year over 10 years to the full valuation on the year 2037.
It's a moving target, right? Because our assessed value is going to continue to change each year. So yes, we could go years out to forecast it, but for purposes of what we were focused on with the fiscal 2027 budget, that's where we just stopped at that point, trying to get our hands around our most immediate need of where we would be affected in the upcoming budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, you can proceed.
Okay, so now we're going to go to the timeline, and the timeline for the ballot questions start at the close of the regular session, which is March 13th. Adoption of a final resolution, whether it be in a special session or in the regular session, must occur before August 4th, 2026, which is 90 days prior to the general election, and that's the timing that's required in order to have your resolution ready for ballot language and to be able to provide the notice that's required to those who are voting for the measures. The general election would be the November 3rd, 2026 date, and the law would be effective January 5th, 2027 if there's no effective date within the resolution that's presented, or the date that's specified within the resolution. Currently, a number of those resolutions includes the date of January 1st, 2027. And again, this adoption of a proposed ballot measure would require the 60% vote of the those who are casting their ballots.
Madam City Attorney, has there been any conversation, at one point when this came up last year, there was discussion about doing some kind of study of potential impact on local governments. Is that just gone by the wayside now? Have you any other conversation about doing some kind of study?
I am not up to date on what they did or did not do. I know that they have had several committee meetings outside of this process to talk about what specific impacts there are to local governments. I know that the League of Cities more than likely is sharing information that they have gleaned, but I certainly can get updated information to provide what, if any, actual physical studies have been commenced and could be available.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we have any information that shows proportionately how this would impact the city of West Palm Beach as opposed to the other municipalities? I know that's not necessarily directly relevant to what we're talking about here, but I'm just wondering, are we disproportionately affected based upon the number of homesteaded properties we have versus commercial, or are there other I would think there's other municipalities, and I can think of a few, that are almost all residential and probably almost all homesteaded with very little commercial. I would think that they would be disproportionately impacted. I mean, where would we fit in that with regard to the number of homesteaded properties that we have that could be affected as opposed to the commercial properties or the like?
That's coming up.
Oh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Okay, good to see.
And any of you who want to read the bills, they're right there in that blue binder and available for you. Bridget?
Okay, so this morning I have information for West Palm Beach's property breakdown that we're going to discuss our parcels. I don't have anything countywide, haven't taken the time to look at that yet. I can check the database from the county. I assume we have access to all of the other municipalities. Avril is shaking her head, so we can look at that if it's something that you feel will give you some further talking points. So we're going to look at the property breakdown and then the implications of the property tax proposals from the view of our general fund operations. So included in that data dashboard from the county, we were supplied with our 2025 property data. As you can see here, we have 45,815 properties within the city with a value of just over $24 billion. The data here is showing us that homesteaded properties represent 45% of our properties, while 55% of our properties are considered non-homesteaded. Just because I've heard a lot of terms, with homestead exclusively commercial, that's not the case. So I want to make sure that you understand the categories that fall into homestead include residential, condos, multifamily, government buildings, industrial, agricultural, and commercial. So it's not just exclusively commercial. So I challenge the data to make sure that we're using the right language as we're speaking publicly on this, homesteaded versus non-homesteaded. So again, homestead is at 45% of our property category and 55% non-homestead. Oops. So bringing that into the general fund, just as a reminder, as we look at our major revenue sources within the general fund, 53% of the general fund is made up by property taxes. While on one hand, that sounds like a lot, but for purposes of today, 53% is not a lot of our general fund when that property tax comes into play. The next largest item is charges for services at 19%. License and permits at 15%, and intergovernmental revenue at 11.5%. So shift your thinking into the expenditures now. As we look at a balanced budget, which we always have for fiscal year 2026, when you break up our departments into these three categories, 24% of our department operations in the general fund are quality of life departments. That's your library, parks and rec, sanitation, engineering, and development services, just to name a few. Internal governance is at 18% of our expenditures. Legal, finance, HR, marketing, communications, mayor and administration. And the bulk of our expenditures within our general fund is public safety at 58%. As we consider the concept of property tax elimination and even reduction, it is crucial to understand that our public safety operations cost more than all of our property taxes. Public safety is at 58% of our expenses. Property taxes only covers 53% of the general fund. So in terms of dollars, property taxes, we bring in $149 million, public safety expenses, $165 million. So that is, meaning any reduction in our property taxes will result in reductions to our quality of life and internal governance operations. This slide reviews the department's fiscal year 2026 adopted budget by dollar and then breaks out the percentage that that department is of the general fund, further displaying the impact that property tax reductions will have on our operations and our residents based on the department size and volume of that department. So yes, I'm going back to this slide because as I close out on my brief portion of this presentation, this is the data point that I hope you can commit to memory and take with you when you think about the financial implications relative to property tax reductions. 53% of our general fund is made up of property tax revenue. 58% of our expenses are in public safety. Any questions?
Very well stated. Any questions, Commissioner Fox?
Thank you. On page 4, when you talk about the revenue sources, it's not a huge percentage of the budget, but when you mentioned the local government half-cent sales tax, I thought that was expiring, or is that something else that I'm thinking about?
It is, but this was based off of our fiscal year 26 budget.
Okay, so we shouldn't be including that as a revenue source going forward?
Well, let me just clarify,
Mm-hmm.
and Commissioner Fox, correct me if I'm not understanding your question. I think you may be thinking about the half-cent penny sales tax referendum that the county took on.
That's what I was
So
wondering.
that's separate and apart from the half-cent sales tax revenue that we get from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions this time? Okay. Does that conclude the presentation for today? You're going out on a high note? Not?
Welcome to our world, Mr. Mayor.
Wow.
It's back to the board for discussion or conclusion.
Well, I mean, this is a very scary proposition because even though it'll go to the voters, I mean, you got to expect that voters are going to vote for a tax decrease on themselves. And so the potential fiscal implications to local governments, not just West Palm, but local governments, right, is catastrophic. I don't think that's overstating the implication. It is catastrophic. I don't know, and I guess somehow we've got to educate the public on what it means if they don't have library, what it means if they don't have development services, if they don't have utility. I mean, these things are real. And I don't know what the, hopefully with those who are active with the League of Cities and other municipal organizations. Hopefully there is a task force working on the path forward. Commissioner Warren, I know you're involved with that organization. What kind of conversations are going on?
It's a unified conversation. Every municipality that is a member of the League of Cities is standing in opposition of this and has spoken to this in Tallahassee. We know that it is a complete attack on home rule and to shatter everything that we know that allows local governance. And there's a lot of concern, but this is the majority of what we've been discussing. And, you know, again, it is a unified effort to oppose this, but we're concerned.
And hopefully that will continue. You said you were in Tallahassee. I mean, is the business community aware? Listen, they are trying to tout Florida as a business-friendly state. But you can't be a business-friendly state if your cities can't even afford to provide public safety. So is there any conversation going on at the chamber levels on this point?
I went to an information session with the Palm Beach North Chamber, and they also had the Florida Chamber representative there. And right now, they weren't taking a hard stance, but they were surveying their members. And based on the survey information they provided us, there was opportunity for support to modify this and to stand up with the League of Cities and with the municipalities, but they weren't taking a hard stance yet.
Mr. Frank, and we'll go back to.
Just adding to the comments that occurred this morning that we didn't prepare for with the presentation. If you look at the non-homesteaded properties, only 5% of our non-homesteaded are classified as commercial. So just let that piece, that data point sink in. 18% of our non-homesteaded are considered residential, and 22% are considered condos in the non-homesteaded. So to the point of it's going to affect housing, that is where the business community may not see it as much, but the housing community is going to.
Commissioner Baduzzi?
I agree with you, Mayor, that public education is going to be crucial, because if this gets to a referendum and people are asked, do you want a tax cut or not, we know where that's going. So I think it's going to be crucial to educate our residents and the general public, and to work with these other organizations, the Leagues of Cities, and get the word out that life as you know it's not going to be the same if this passes.
President Lambert?
Thank you. I think that today's presentation gave us a very good look at the numbers and the data for this. And I think now what we need to think about is the illustration of what these numbers mean, to your point, Mayor, and to the library services and the other quality of life services, given that we would not be cutting first responders. I know that 10 years ago, plus when the county was looking at the referendum with the school district, I was working closely with the school district at the time, and we did some activities that helped the residents understand the cost of mowing a field, the football field, thinking that, oh, I know how much it costs to mow my lawn, let's just multiply that times 10 or 20 for a football field, but there's a lot of other factors that go in. And I think that sometimes what I'm trying to illustrate is that general population, and we don't understand how much it costs to provide these services. I know when we've been looking at playgrounds on our parks, and residents have said, oh, I'll buy this playground from Costco and I'll donate that. And it costs 10 times that at minimum. And I don't know if there's something that we can do to help illustrate exactly what those deep cuts would be, and when is the right time to do that communications.
Well, I think because this is a statewide effort, we've got to figure out, we got to join forces. I mean, West Palm Beach, we could say what we want, but we are a small pea in the pod when it comes to, this will be a statewide referendum. So it's good that we as a city have this data, and as we hear of other organizations, whether it's the League of Cities, whether it's chambers that are putting together strategies. We need to make sure that we're at the table sharing the information so they at least know what actual hard data is. But the strategy has got to be broader than just the city. This is not a county referendum. This is a state-wide referendum. And I think part of that approach will be, if you all look at your emails, the complaints we get from citizens, most of them relate to quality of life issues, whether it's code enforcement, whether it's homelessness, the affordability of housing. I mean, these are the nature of the complaints that we get. And so if folks are aware that the quality of life that they believe makes West Palm Beach special is now being threatened in very real terms, maybe that'll make an impact, but we need to continue to compile specific data because otherwise we're going to be accused of being an alarmist. So we have to have the numbers and the data to back up the representation of the impact. Commissioner Warren?
I have spoken with Amelia, the new executive director of the League of Cities, and asked her if she would like to come and make a presentation to us to discuss the League's perspective on these. Is that something that we're going to arrange?
That's fine. And I would suggest that we probably do it even at a public meeting, so that there is a record, video, TV coverage of it. But we'll talk about that internally and see what that would look like. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. Could we, just looking at slide 7 with all the breakdowns, you don't have to answer this now, but could I get an understanding of what encompasses general government, and then obviously support services speaks for itself, but if you could just go into that if you're able.
General government is where we show our transfers out of the general fund, so some of our larger ticket items transferring into the capital fund or into debt, as well as our contingency is in that line item. Rosanna, I can't see your
I think
face. What am I missing?
one of the big ones in there is the debt service, if
Yes,
I remember
correct,
correctly.
which would be a transfer out of the general fund. Mm-hmm.
President Lambert.
As part of this process, have we looked at areas that we can find efficiencies in? I know in the past, Administrator Johnson, you've come to us and said we've cut into the bone when we've done our budgeting process. So I'm guessing that, we would assume that we're pretty lean already, but I was just wondering what other activities we might have planned or what we're looking at for that.
As part of a cross-functional department meeting that we had, and my memory escapes me now. I know it was probably back before the fiscal year where we had a discussion about the two fronts of reshaping the general fund. Our focus in that discussion was the reshaping of the general fund due to the millage reduction. Department directors were directed at that point to start looking at their operations to identify where they could create more efficiencies, looking at vacant positions that have been carried for some period of time to evaluate or analyze whether or not there is still a need for that position. Because that is going to be one of the first areas that I will be looking at as part of balancing the FY27 budget. So they have been engaged in the review of their department budgets now for probably several months. We will kick off the FY27 budget process next month and then do a determination of what the budget guidelines will be and a deeper dive into looking at operationals to try to identify efficiencies and what have you.
I think another part of communication strategy is if we were to get hit by a hurricane, and I know we have some money in our, what we call a rainy day fund, but it seems like something like this, who knows if we could even have a rainy day fund. And then we would be at the mercy of state and possibly federal reimbursement. I think that's something else that the public has to begin to understand. And I don't know how we could come up with a playbook, a desktop kind of strategy, assuming, and Ms. Johnson, maybe we could convene a task force to look at just the potential impact of a hurricane or other disaster hitting our city and folding in these types of decreases and what that would do to how would we pay for that even while we're waiting on reimbursement. So let's talk about what that exercise would be. It's almost a war game exercise, but I think that's part of the planning, and it also would impact what we tell the public. We've been very fortunate over the last 5 or 6 years that we haven't been hit. This city hasn't been hit by a major storm, but it's only a matter of time. And what resources will we have available if we take these kind of property tax cuts into account?
So just to put it in perspective, so right now we have the 10% of the operating budget that is designated for hurricane-type recovery and what have you. That funding does not get touched unless we get hit. So the potential.
Was that about 200 million now?
24.6 million.
Okay.
That would be great, but
Well, I was just throwing out
yes.
a number.
So in terms of what the potential impact of what this would be on our ability to recover from a hurricane, if all things remain equal, that money would continue to be tucked away and then we would utilize it. With the reshaping of the budget, the amount that we would have to allocate on an annual basis to meet that 10% threshold just begins to shrink. So it doesn't build up as much as it has in the past.
And if recovery costs exceeded $24 million, we would have to dip into the general fund.
We would.
Whatever other,
yes.
emergency monies we have, if we have any.
That would be it. We have two thresholds of emergency money. You have the 3% for contingencies, capital expenses and what have you, and then the 10%. Those are the two reserves that we have.
All right, and so that's what I'm saying. If we go through, and I don't know, perhaps we could look at historically and during hurricanes what the expenses, what costs have been to the city, so that we're not just pulling numbers out of our back pocket. But if we could just do a kind of a war game exercise based upon historically what kind of costs the city has incurred, and again, we haven't had one in 5 years, so we'll have to factor in inflation, I just think that would be a good exercise to go through to understand. And maybe we've been fortunate; we haven't had hurricane-related expenses to the city during a hurricane that exceeded our 10%, but with the amount of properties that have been built, amount of building that's gone on, et cetera, I just think it would be a good exercise to go to. So let's talk about putting together a task force to go through that exercise and bring that back to this body. All right, Commissioner Fox.
Thank you for the presentation. I guess, can you talk us through what your recommendation is as we're moving forward in this budget process? I mean, obviously, I guess a lot of this will depend on the things how they fall into place, whether it becomes a ballot referendum, and if it is going that way, we still won't know about it until November, and we have to pass a budget for October. So I guess what do you anticipate the planning process looks like for us going into this next budget cycle? Thanks.
Well, at this point, I can't articulate what my recommendation would be. Just simply given the process of putting a balanced budget together, there are so many different factors that come into play. However, as part of whatever the budget process ends up being, the budget development process will proceed on a schedule. At some point in that schedule, and City Attorney, help me out here. At some point in that schedule, there will be definitive action by the state on what would be put out for a referendum. And based on the state schedule, the board would know, as all municipalities would, what would be going out for a referendum. You all will have that information, or that would be decided before we get to the point of the board having to decide what level of a millage reduction you want for FY27. Because with the state process, it will go out on the referendum in 26, and then it will hit the FY28 budget, which is why we're planning that the general fund budget would be reshaped twice. So in terms of the connection between the two, conceivably, the millage reduction would then come into play with factoring what that financial impact would be on FY28, because it's then based on your millage rate at that point.
So if you want to know the dates, the potential dates, if any of the joint resolutions that we reviewed for the House and the Senate go through the entire process and are approved, that will happen on or before March 13th. And then those proposed resolutions will be, they'll create the ballot language, which is 75 words, and the entire resolution itself would go to the public for a vote. That vote would happen November 3rd. If it's not one of the joint resolutions and a special session happens, or one or more, I should say, if a special session happens and they adopt a new joint resolution that's negotiated between the House and the Senate, that must be concluded by August 4th in order for it to be on the ballot. So the latest date that it can occur for this year would be August 4th.
Okay, so given those two endpoints, you got March and August, we would look to stay on schedule with having our budget balance in July, but certainly the board would then have that discretion between July and when the budget has to get adopted based on the budget hearing date, so September. So that kind of give you an estimated time frame of how the two would interconnect.
And I think another reason for bringing this to your attention at this point, if you recall at the end of the budget session last year, there was a strong sentiment among the commission to do a millage reduction. So we're just trying to bring this information to you all hot off the press. So as you are looking at this year's budget and maybe even pursuing a millage reduction, you'll know the challenges that are involved, and you're being educated on those challenges early in the process, so it doesn't appear that it's coming up as a surprise. And we will keep advising you as we get closer to some of these deadlines what some of these challenges are, so that you can feel like, hopefully, that you are fully in the loop as to whether it is feasible to do a millage reduction this year or not. So again, it's not a matter of alarming anyone, it's just educating us all. Commissioner Peduzzi.
Thank you, Mayor. And I certainly was one of the ones that was advocating for a millage reduction, but certainly if we're faced with potentially catastrophic consequences, if it gets to a referendum, I certainly wouldn't be the one pushing for this at this time. You know, there's a number of options that looks like that they're looking at, and some wouldn't be so catastrophic and some would be catastrophic. You know, 10 or 12 million we probably could absorb. 50 million could be catastrophic. You know, hopefully if they do pass something, and I think it's very likely that something's going to pass the legislature, so, you know, maybe the League of Cities and other organizations out there should advocate for for something minimal as opposed to nothing, because something's going to probably pass. And, I guess we just prepare for the worst. And I don't know during the process if we can mock up what a budget would look like, depending on it might be too early for that, but just so we could look at the potential impact to our city services. I think you could pretty safely say that if one of these catastrophic numbers passes, that, your library, your parks and recreation, and likewise are going to be gone. And people have to understand that. Those are the first things you're going to have to cut, because you can't cut public safety, you can't cut public services because they bring in money to the city. You can't, or development services. Public works and things like that also deal with public safety. It's going to be tough. And hopefully if something passes, hopefully it's something reasonable that we can absorb. But it could be catastrophic. So I guess we just need to hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Yes, but what I would envision, one of the processes we would go through would be similar to the process we went through when we were facing the impact from COVID-19. We had each of the general fund operations to identify which function within their operation and which position was required by statute. In addition to that, which position or operation was required by city charter or by city ordinance, and then anything that fell out of those requirements, were the items that we looked at in terms of recommending, a reduction. So we would go through a similar process, I would imagine, and then, if there's input on other areas that or processes that we can put in place, certainly it's going to take all of our collective good thinking, to try to navigate through potentially what may be ahead.
Commissioner Warren?
I just want to say that my concerns include the reduction to meaningful local governance if this goes through, and the dependence on state, and how budgeting from that point forward would become more political than anything that we could have imagined. And I'm concerned about central decision-making taking place in Tallahassee for the residents of West Palm Beach versus us being able to address the issues for our residents, like water and everything else. To have those things be at the discretion of people that are not immediately impacted and have no idea what it takes to exist here is pretty alarming to me. Not to sound an alarm or be a person that's saying, that the sky is on fire, but I think that this is something that we all need to really take into consideration.
No, the sky is on fire. I think you're absolutely right. This is the elimination of home rule on steroids. We complain, I know I've complained, about having our hands tied when it comes to what we could do with gun laws and other things. This takes it to a whole different level, as you said, Commissioner, where our budget priorities are going to be determined by Tallahassee. I'm not sure that, well, I know that the legislature in Tallahassee does not know what the priorities of West Palm Beach should be, or any other major city, whether it's Tampa or Miami or Orlando. Government closest to the people is best to the people, for the people. So you're absolutely right there. Quick question, Madam City Attorney. You mentioned a number of House joint resolutions. A joint resolution has to have a Senate counterpart, right? Do these have Senate counterparts?
No, they're a little bit different in that either the House or the Senate can propose a joint resolution, but what ultimately has to happen is that they both have to adopt it with a 3/5 vote of the full House, 3/5 vote of the full Senate, and then it'll move forward. It's either or.
Okay, so the House joint resolution is the House's
The
attempt,
House's proposal.
but that has to go to the Senate, and then both bodies have to, it's a 3/5.
Correct.
Just like the Senate can have a joint resolution. Okay. All right. Anything else? Any matters for the good of the body? Okay, go forth. And well, I guess we could be happy that we're not in the Northeast with all that bad weather. That's something to be thankful for. Okay, this meeting is adjourned.